Morning, folks. Welcome back. This is the last video for this unit. We have made it through the Second World War. Going forward, today, obviously, I'll finish the unit. Friday, I'm going to give you a project kind of similar to what you did for the unit 3. Yeah, unit 3, World War One. So I'm going to do it. It looks very similar, so it's a lot of the same sort of stuff. You're going to just answer the questions and whatever is there, and then submit that to me, and then I will I'll see if I'll do a video on Monday or if I'll push it to Wednesday. We'll see, because we also will do a written response, but I'll spread it out so you'll have more time to work on each of them instead of having to focus to try to finish everything all at once. That being said, please make sure you've been doing the quizzes. And I know I've said this so many times, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the funny thing is that I say it a lot, and yet some of you don't hear it. So I'm going to say it one more time. You have an unlimited amount of time, attempts to do these quizzes. That means that you can do them 1,000 times if you wanted to. So that means that eventually you will get 100%. I would hope so. If not, maybe we should have a little talk. So you should be getting 100% on all of them, and that will boost your markup. Make sure you're doing all the booklets. Even if you want to give me Unit 1's booklet, I'll do it right now. I'll mark it for you as if it wasn't late and hasn't been 4 months or so that it was due. Because I want you to succeed. I want you to do well, and going forward, because you're grade 11 right now. You're going to be doing Social 30 next year, and I want you to do well, because a lot of the stuff that we talk about now, you will readdress it in Social 30. So I want you to do well. So please continue to do them, and I will help you. Like I said before, the offer still stands that if anybody wants a more one-on-one or in a group setting, we can do a online chat, a Zoom, a Google Meet, all these sort of things, whatever you want. We can do that. Just let me know, and we can set that up, and I can walk you through things. I can help you with the projects, the written assignments, the booklets, whatever it is that you're having a problem with, and I can help you. But I can only help if I know that you need help. So please let me know, and we can get that going. So today we're going to focus our attention on Student Activity Guide 31, Crimes Against Humanity. We're going to look at the question of what examples of crimes against humanity occurred during the war. It's because of World War II that the idea or the actual phrasing of the term crimes against humanity came up, and the idea of war crimes. We actually get them because of World War II, and then going forward, we actually use the rulings that come out of this war to try people in the future. So, for example, in the 1990s, Yugoslavia, it breaks up, and then in the late 80s it breaks up, and then throughout the 90s there's a civil war that takes place in Yugoslavia between Croatians, Serbians, Slovenians, etc. Bosnians are involved as well, and a lot of the perpetrators of these wars are actually tried for war crimes. So that just shows you the length of time it takes to get these sort of things in place. So this is page 36 of your activity booklet. The terms that we're going to be introduced today, so these are not really terms, these are more concepts or events in history. The Nanjing or the Nanking massacre, the Holocaust, and Japanese internment. So you are probably familiar with at least one of those, probably the Holocaust because it's so infamous. Japanese internment you might know because it's a local thing, it's a Canadian thing. The Nanjing massacre, you may not know it, but we did talk about it briefly. We'll mention it today, and I'll even show you some videos and stuff. So we'll get to that. Okay, so we're going to start all the way back in 1937 with the rape of Nanking. This predates the war. This is when Japan tests how far it can go without the League of Nations really acting. So Nanking was the capital of the Republic of China. So China has had a very interesting past. Ancient China was an empire, and then it slowly becomes a republic, thanks in large part to the Europeans and their sweet desire for opium. But if you're curious about that, I can give you some videos to watch about that. Anyways, so the Japanese in 1937 invade northern China, or Manchuria as it was called, and they capture Nanking. And while the Japanese are in Nanking, we see some of the worst atrocities of the 1930s take place. So we see things like the Japanese Imperial Army murders, loots, rapes between 40 to 300,000 civilians and unarmed combatants. So at first they are fighting solely the Chinese army. Once they get into Nanking, they focus their attention and their frustrations on the civilians. So there are some very, very harsh and very, very sadistic and sad stories that come out of Nanking at this time. I will post a video or a link to a survivor story of a man who survives Nanking. I do warn you, if you do not like to hear sad stories or things like that, please don't watch it, because it is pretty gruesome and it is pretty graphic, what he describes. So I'll leave that to your discretion. Modern Japan admits deaths occur, but they deny war crimes were committed, or they claim that these what happened has been over exaggerated. This strain continues to exist between China and Japan over the historical interpretations of this event. So when we talk about crimes against humanity and war crimes and things like genocide, the perpetrators and the victims, they will always have this sort of disagreement between what actually happened. So China and Japan, they have this sort of thing. If we look back at other examples of genocides as well, this is a thing too. Probably we'll take it back to the first genocide of the 20th century that happened during World War One, between the Armenians and the Ottoman Turks. Present day situation stands where Turkey denies that a genocide took place, where the Armenians do claim that 1.5 million Armenians were killed and thus deem it a genocide. Other countries have weighed in and have agreed that it is a genocide, whereas others have not, and they still claim it to be just a massacre, whereas others say it hasn't existed as well. So the interpretation of this event, these sort of events, it does create a conflict or a rift between the two who take part in it. So that is the rape of Nanking. If you're curious more, I can give you some resources that you can read into. I believe there's some pretty good books that have been written about it. But again, if you don't have the stomach for it, please don't push into this. So the next one that we're going to focus on here is the Holocaust. So this is also known as the Shoah in Hebrew, so the catastrophe. If I said that wrong, I apologize. The name of the genocide in which Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany and its allies killed an estimated 6 million of the total 9 million Jews in Europe. So the Holocaust as a whole, it kills 13 million people. 6 million of them are Jews. But the other 7 million is a mixture of Russian POWs, gypsies, homosexuals, the physically and the mentally disabled, political opponents, so socialists and communists, other POWs that were taken, so American, British, Canadians, and even Italians. We saw there was a switch between the Italian. They switched sides a little bit. Well, but anyways, so a lot of people were victims of this, but 6 million Jews were killed. It culminated. It's the culmination of a systematic abuse and dehumanization of the Jewish people. So when the Nazis took over, Early on, we have the Night of Long Knives. We talked about it briefly, where Hitler got rid of all his political opponents. Then, I believe in 1936, we have what's known as Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, where German mobs were essentially allowed or encouraged to go and destroy Jewish businesses and homes and synagogues. And the police, they watched, the firefighters, they watched as businesses, homes, synagogues burned down to the ground. Fast forward a little bit, not very much though, probably 1937, 38, maybe in 36 too. You get the Nuremberg Laws, which essentially says that Germans cannot marry Jews, Jews cannot own property, Jews cannot, they can live in certain places, they can't live in other places. It limits their existence. So progressively things are getting worse, and then it culminates in the rounding up and organizing Jews into ghettos, and then shipping them off to camps to either be worked to death or simply to be executed right away. So there was over 42,000 facilities, and 200,000 people are thought to have been involved in the genocide. So when it says involved, we're talking about things like guards, people who worked there in any capacity, people who are writing down the notes and keeping a record of what's taking place. So a lot of people were involved. At the Nuremberg trial, so after the war, the Allies have there is a trial set up in the city of Nuremberg, and any of the higher up Nazis officials that were captured are brought there to be tried for their war crimes and their crimes against humanity. And there's an attempt to punish the perpetrators of these events. So they do have some pretty high-ranking officials there. So, for example, Hermann Göring, the leader of the head of the Luftwaffe, is there. Albert Hess, who was the deputy Führer, so like the second in command. Although he spends most of his time in an English prison because he does leave Germany. He flies to England in the middle of the night to try to create a peace between Germany and England during the night, like in 1940. He's actually put in prison there, so he actually gets brought back. They do even catch Heinrich Himmler, who is the head of the SS, but a lot of them, they commit suicide in prison, so they'll take cyanide pills, and they won't actually get tried, but they'll commit suicide. But some do. So, anyways, let's move on. Slide 153. It shows you a pie chart of the Holocaust deaths. So like we talked about, so 8% are Soviet Jews, 20% are Soviet prisoners of war, 10% political, 3% Yugoslav from Yugoslavia, 2% Romanian, 1% disabled, 1% other, 22% ethnic Poles, Ukrainians, and Belarusians, 24% are Polish Jews, 4% Romanian Jews, 2% Czechoslovakian Jews, 2% Hungarian, 1% German, and 1% other. A personal story for me, my great uncle, who was in the Italian army, he was conscripted forcefully at the age of 18. He fought in Greece, and then when the Italians switched sides in 1943, when they overthrew Mussolini, his unit was actually put into a concentration camp, and unfortunately, he dies there. He contracts tuberculosis, and when the Red Army liberates the camp that he was at, they were trying to bring him back to Russia for medical treatment, but he dies in Poland, so he's buried there. And we know the city where he's buried, but we don't actually know where his grave is. So it has been a life goal of mine to find that grave and honor his memory. But that's a little personal story for me, so I appreciate you listening. So there is a documentary here. It is 44 minutes long if you wanted to have a watch. It is related to the stories of the Holocaust. So You could have a watch on that. I will post some videos related to this in the description, but I would give that a watch too if you can find the time. On slide 155, this is what Europe looked like towards the end of the Second World War, and it shows you the areas occupied by Germany and the allies of the Germans. The squares are all labor camps. So these were the places where you would work until either you died, or it was mostly until you died. The squares that have a little square on the inside, these are where extermination camps were, and the majority of the extermination camps are found in Poland. When Germany invades Poland, they reorganize it into what's called the general government. So if you do see that, that's just Poland. And they do have a lot of the extermination camps there. So we are talking about places like Treblinka, Sobibor, Chelmno, and of course Auschwitz. So these are the big ones that are known for people. So they're found mostly in Poland. So a lot of European Jews were actually shipped to Poland to be exterminated. But it logistically they put it there because, like we saw in the pie chart, a lot of those who died were Polish Jews and Soviet Jews, and then ethnic Ukrainians, Poles, and Belarusians as well. So there was a lot of Eastern Slavic peoples who were the main targets of the Germans. If we look at this picture on slide 156, you can again see the camp system in 1944. We are talking about hundreds of camps that exist. The ones that in Germany, again, most of them were labor camps, there were people who were dying in these places, but they were not specifically designed for extermination. You weren't going there straight away to be executed. You were there to work, to produce things for the Nazi war effort as a slave labor force. So the Germans were using a slave labor force to help keep the fighting going. So again, that is our look at the Holocaust. We're going to look now at the other side of the Alliance system and look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 and the idea of the war crimes that were and the crimes against humanity that were perpetrated there. So many policies of national interest are for security. The atomic bombs attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki have been justified as protecting the security of the United States. So when we saw the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa and the other island systems, the Solomon Islands, there were thousands of U.S. soldiers that were dying, and the U.S. government at the time argued that the nuclear bombs were the only way to prevent hundreds of thousands of deaths of U.S. soldiers invading the Japanese homeland. So Harry Truman, the president at the time, made the decision to drop the bombs and justifies that it saved the lives of U.S. soldiers. He doesn't mention that it kills over 100,000 Japanese civilians, and I want to make that point very clear. It's civilian lives. It's not just military personnel. So that is why some people are arguing that these are examples of war crimes. So many say that the same effect, the surrender of Japan, could have been achieved by the demonstration of the bombs, not necessarily having to use them, or that the attacking of military installations. The supreme commander of the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe and future President Dwight Eisenhower disagreed with dropping the bomb. So you're even having some military personnel arguing that this is not, there was no justification for it. So that is why we can look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the use of the atomic bomb as a war crime. Others say this wouldn't have been as effective. The U.S. only had two bombs produced. Truman was more concerned with the post-war world and wanted to show the Soviets American power. So there was this idea that This was just a show of force for the future, because after World War One is over, essentially you have two superpowers left, and it's the Soviet Union and the United States. And you're going to see after 1945, what's known as the Cold War begins between those two powers. So again, some people argue that the United States was really just showing what it could potentially do and to deter any sort of Soviet aggression towards the United States. But if we're talking about crimes against humanity, the death of that many Japanese civilians, it can be argued that this is a war crime, because it wasn't just military installations or industry that was attacked, it was whole cities that were wiped out and people just vaporized, like we said a few videos ago. So that is an example of that is a potentially, I can't even say it. This is a war crime there. And people have argued it, but again, nobody was really tried or for this. Now let's bring it a little bit more closer to home. We'll look at ultranationalism in Canada. Many Canadians were caught up in the racism and extreme nationalism of the time. So, like in World War One, German, Ukrainian, Italian, and Japanese Canadians were discriminated against and seen as enemies and potential spies for their home countries. So in 1942, Japanese Canadians who lived within 160 kilometers of Canada's Pacific coast were imprisoned in internment camps and sent to places like Alberta and Saskatchewan in camps to live so they cannot spy for the Japanese. I will show you. I'll put a link in the description for a video related to this, because these people were living in camps, and we saw in Germany they were doing the exact same thing to the Jews. So this could be seen as a war crime done on Canadian soil. Other homes, property, and business were sold for bargain prices, and the money used to fund the camps. So they're having their stuff sold to other people, and then the money that is generated is actually used to support the camp system. The Canadian government has apologized and has offered money for the survivors of this horrific period in Canadian history. But again, when we look at in terms of what happened to these people psychologically, physically, emotionally, it's a question of, is there enough money that you can give a person to make them feel better? In my opinion, no. So you can see the small picture here is an example of a Japanese camp, and then here's a poster that would have been posted for the rounding up of the Japanese. On slide 159 here, the MS St. Louis in a news article says, ship steams away to return refugees to Reich. So what this is, there was a boat that left Germany before the onset of the war, full of Jewish refugees that went to Canada, and the Canadian government said no, and then it went to the United States, and they said no, and then these Jews were sent back to Germany. So again, crimes against humanity and these war crimes, yes, the Germans and the Japanese extremely guilty. The Soviets, yes, but America, United States, the British, again, nobody has their hands clean. Nobody can say that they kept their hands clean throughout the war. If you're interested, I may even post a video about the Dresden fire bombings. Again, a way that the Allies thought they could get the Germans to surrender. It's an example of a war crime because it's targeting specifically the civilian population of the city of Dresden, which had, again, no connection to military production or anything like that. So, summary here. What examples of war crimes occurred during the war? Well, we can start back in 1937 with the invasion of Manchuria and the massacres of Nanking or Nanjing. That starts it off. A civilian population attacked by the Japanese army. Obviously, the Holocaust and the brutality of the Nazi regime against the Jewish population of Europe and against people that they deemed their enemies. On the flip side, if we look at the Allies, we can argue that the bomb droppings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are also examples of war crimes because, again, you're targeting a civilian population. Yes, it does save American lives, but at the cost of Japanese civilian lives. So there is that sort of balance there. If we look at Canada, Canada did have Japanese internment camps specifically designed to house Japanese civilians in Canada who had no connection to the Japanese government. The only crime they ever committed in terms of what the Canadian government at the time thought is that they were Japanese. So just their race is what made them susceptible. And I mean, the Germans had done the exact same thing to the Jews in the 1930s and 40s. So again, like I said before, nobody's hands are clean in this sort of situation. So that's it for today. That's it for this unit. Look towards Friday. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll post a video. I'll go through the project, post the project on the announcement section, and then I'll give you time to work on that. So that's it for today. It was a very somber video. I understand. Thank you for those who watched it. Just continue working on your stuff. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. And I will see you on Friday. Have a good day.